Welcome to the class of History, Politics, and Power. In this class, we'll be looking at why General Ibrahim Babangida overthrew General Muhammadu Buhari in a military coup. It is always the power game. And in the power game, you would understand that power is an elusive force. Power is desired, power is pursued, and sometimes power is taken by force. But one thing I have noticed in the power game, especially in a system of brutal power, is that those who hold it often find themselves at the mercy of the very system that they command. And nowhere is this more evident than in Nigeria's military era, where a circle of coups and counter-coups shaped the destiny of the state. So as we go in this class, we will make reference to books. And the book of the day is the autobiography of Ibrahim Babangida. It's entitled A Journey in Service. So this is the book of the day. We are going to read from this book. Some have said it is controversial. Some have said it is interesting. And I have read the book, and I think you should read the book. Yes, I am going to read from this book in this class. And reading from this book will help us understand the subject of this class. Another book we'll be reading from is Soldiers of Fortune, Nigerian Politics from Buhari to Babangida, 1983 to 1993. It's a book written by Siollun. It's a classic. Should I say that this is the best book on the military of that era? It's a classic. Reading this book tells the story of the military from 1983 to 1993. So this book is a reference material for this class. It's about history. It's about politics. It's about power. Nigeria has a long history of military coups. Between 1966 and 1999, Nigeria was mostly under military control. One coup after another shaped the fate of the Nigerian state. But on the 1st of January, 1984, the military overthrew the civilian government of Shehu Shagari. A group of senior military officers took over power. Their leader was Major General Muhammadu Buhari. His deputy was Major General Tunde Idiagbon. Among the officers who helped remove Shagari was General Ibrahim Babangida. He was rewarded with the powerful position of the Chief of Army Staff. Now, the Chief of Army Staff controls the army. So Babangida controlled the army. He was compensated with that position. Information from the grapevine said he was well positioned to be the leader after the coup. But that is not the subject of this class. The subject is, why did Babangida remove Buhari from power? Chief Tola Adeni, a renowned journalist, understood the military of that time. He was connected to them. He reported on their events and he understood their personality. Chief Tola Adeni, a former chairman and editor-in-chief of the Daily Times, followed the politics of that time, and he gives us insight into those moments.
after Bako had been killed, Buhari was made head of state, he would have been the head of state because he was the leader of the coup. He was the most senior. Was one who went to actually to accost Shagari and to arrest him. So Bako was killed. If Bako had not been killed, Bako probably would have been the head of state. And then they had a compromise candidacy in Buhari. And I think, if my recollection is correct, it was at that point in time planned or arranged that certain characters will take over from Bako after 4 years, another will take over from that person, another will take over from that person. And that if Christians made a noise, then the Christian, like Dogunyaro, would take over. In the 14th year or 12th year to run to 16th year.
Let me get it clear.
Yes.
Was it that Buhari was going to rule for 4 years, then Babangida 4 years, and then Abacha 4 years?
Yes, something like that.
Chief Tola Adeni is strolling with me in this class. So, he is my analyst on this edition of the class. The struggle for power is not just about governance. It's also about survival. During the military era, each leader knew that beneath the surface of loyalty, ambition brewed. Trust was illusory. The gun, not the ballot, decided leadership. They said Buhari's government was strict, very strict. His military rule was marked by rigid policies and a harsh war against indiscipline. Buhari jailed politicians and clamped down on press freedom. Listen to this discourse with Chief Tola Adeni.
In 1979, you worked with the UPN.
I worked with the Tribune.
But you were the UPN for some time.
That was in 78 years. I worked with UPN in 78.
Okay, in 70 years,
Yes,
not 79.
No, 78.
So you were part of the publicity network of the party at the time.
I was deputy or special assistant to Chief MC Kajiluchuku, my boss.
And I can always say, when Buhari took over, he arrested the governors of the UPN.
Yes, he did.
Governors you had sympathy for.
Certainly.
And these governors wanted Buhari out, right?
They did, yes.
Why did they want Buhari out? The Bolaiges?
They were fed up with what they considered to be injustice. They thought that if MPN was the failure of MPN was the trigger for the overthrow of the MPN government, official government, why should the UPN also be, rough-handled? And so they certainly didn't feel comfortable with Buhari as head of state.
Did they reach out to you?
I wouldn't know. I mean, I visited them. I visited some of them in prison.
What did they tell you?
What they told me was that they are not happy. And if you are in their shoes, you would also have told me the same.
They wanted Buhari out.
Even if they wanted Buhari out, which they didn't hide, I would have been able to influence that. I would have been able to effect that.
You have the pen. And you had the connection.
I had connections.
Your friends were in the military.
Yes, they were.
Abacha was your friend. Babangida was your friend.
Yes.
So, did you take any message to Babangida and Abacha?
I don't think I will answer that question. I don't think... I wouldn't know. I certainly wouldn't answer whether I took a message. Nobody sent me on an errand to Babangida.
Remember, you knew that Buhari was going to be overthrown.
I suspected, given the sixth sense, given my experience, that it was not likely to last.
And you knew IBB was going to be the next head of state, right?
I didn't know who was going to be head of state, but I knew that among those left after Bako had been killed and after Buhari had taken over, the next most obvious person to succeed him would have been Babangida.
Tunde Idiagbon was Buhari's deputy. He was powerful and feared. Many believed he had more control over the government than Buhari himself. The military elite wasn't happy. Even Babangida, who helped bring Buhari to power, felt sidelined. Babangida wanted influence. Babangida wanted control. He controlled the army, the reaper of the military government. Did Buhari take him for granted? Babangida was patient. He watched. He planned. On the 27th of August 1985, he struck. Without firing a single shot, he removed Buhari from power. There was no blood shed.
And you knew that Buhari was going to be overthrown?
Not that I knew. These things are not documented. I could have known. I wasn't a military guy. I wasn't in the military.
You remember you were at a polytechnic in Abeokuta?
Yes, I was there.
What did you say there?
I was a guest speaker, and because of the noise being made here and there, and I quote myself that, ladies and gentlemen, that you shouldn't be surprised if you hear again, I Brigadier Sana Abacha.
What were you trying to tell the students?
That probably we have not come to the full stop, that what we had was just a comma, and that another military personnel could intervene and overthrow Buhari at that point in time.
How did he do it? Did he tell that story in his autobiography? You need to read that book. And you'll find that book on udarabooks.com. I'm talking about Babangida's autobiography, A Journey in Service. It's a book I am recommending to you. Read that book. It gives you different perceptions about power and why men of power do what they do. Having removed Buhari from power in a palace coup, Babangida came on radio. He told Nigerians why he removed Buhari. Let me quote part of his speech. He says Buhari was too rigid. He refused to listen. He did not understand that Nigeria is a diverse country. We needed a leader who could unite us, not divide us. That was Babangida there. But let's listen to a snippet of the speech that Babangida delivered on the 27th of August, 1985. That speech marked the beginning of his reign as Nigeria's head of state.
We have come with the strongest determination to create an atmosphere in which positive efforts shall be given the necessary support for lasting solutions. For matters of the moment which require immediate resolution, we intend to pursue a determined program of action, and indeed future generations have no other country but Nigeria. We must all stay and salvage it together.
So it's time to look at what Babangida has got to say in his book about why he decided to topple Buhari in collaboration with other senior military officers. So this is Babangida's autobiography, A Journey in Service. So let's read together. I want to read from chapter 6 entitled Mounting the Saddle, Defining a Military Presidency. Babangida says by the beginning of 1985, the citizenry had become apprehensive about the future of our country. The atmosphere was precarious and fraught with ominous signs of clear and present danger. It was clear to the more discerning leadership of the armed forces that initial rescue mission of 1983 had largely miscarried. We now stood the risk of having the armed forces split down the line because our rescue mission had largely derailed. If the armed forces imploded, the nation would go with it, and the end was just too frightening to contemplate, Babangida writes. He continues on page 118. My predecessor in office, Major General Muhammadu Buhari, and his deputy, Brigadier Tunde Idiagbon, had separated themselves from the mainstream of the armed forces by personalizing what was initially a collective leadership. They both posited a holier-than-thou attitude, antagonizing the civil populace against the military. You see, Buhari did not attend the launch of this book. Have you asked why? Perhaps Buhari has not forgiven Babangida for that palace coup. Or perhaps Buhari read this part of the book before the launch and said, there is no way I'm going to honor this man with my presence. You can see what Babangida wrote about him here. He said, Buhari and Idiagbon posited a holier-than-thou attitude, antagonizing the civil populace against the military. Fundamental rights and freedoms were being routinely infringed upon and abused. As a military administration, we were now presiding over a society that was primarily frightened of us. He continues, like most military coups, our leadership change was informed by widespread disquiet among the civil populace. Ordinary people were experiencing severe economic hardship. The general economic and social conditions the people lived under were worsening by the day. So Buhari wasn't doing well. That is Babangida's judgment. But this is another part I think Nigerians should pay attention to. That is page 119. Remember, the subject of the class is why Babangida overthrew the Buhari administration. This is critical to the reasons. Babangida said in his book, on several occasions and instances, even the very integrity of the armed forces was being called into question. A disciplinary case involving allegations of divided interest against some officers was decided without due recourse to the Army Council. Instead of waiting for a report and investigation from the Army leadership, the affected officers were unceremoniously relieved of their commission, and their military career of so many years was abruptly ended without any input from the Army as their institution of origin. Babangida says, I confided in some senior colleagues that I would rather resign my commission than continue in office as Chief of Army Staff without input into decisions that concern the careers of personnel under my command. In response, I was placed under surveillance, with the privacy of my communications and those of my family constantly monitored. The tense atmosphere culminated in the unanimous decision of a broad spectrum of senior and middle-level officers to change the nation's leadership. The processes associated with this change was completed without bloodshed by midnight on August 26, 1985. That is Babangida in his book, A Journey in Service, an Autobiography. I recommend this book to you. You'll find it on udarabooks.com. Babangida in his book explained his side of the story. But that is Babangida speaking for himself. He was an insider. He has told his story. But Siollun was not part of them. So he wrote a story in his book Soldiers of Fortune, Nigerian Politics from Buhari to Babangida, 1983 to 1993. So look at this book. So I would say that Siollun is a neutral observer. Let's read from his book. I want to read from page 50 of his book. The book is a classic. It's a classic. If you don't have this book in your shelf, you should have a rethink. Yes, if you are interested in politics and power, if you are interested in history. So let's read together. It says, Iyama was not the only woman linked to drug dealing. Another woman named Gloria Okon was arrested in 1985 at the Aminu Kano International Airport in Kano in possession of several kilograms of cocaine. She was trying to board a flight to Europe. After being arrested, Okon mysteriously died a few days later in custody. Buhari appointed a judicial commission of inquiry to investigate her death. But Buhari was overthrown before the judicial commission could submit its report. The report was eventually submitted to Buhari's successor, Ibrahim Babangida, in September 1985, but its findings remain unknown. Look at it. Buhari instituted a commission of inquiry to investigate drug dealings. But before the report was submitted, his colleagues overthrew him. Can we interpret that? It's just something we don't know that the military boys knew, that they didn't want the report of that commission to see the daylight. So when it was submitted to Babangida, what did Babangida do with that report? Siollun says Buhari's tough stance on crime and corruption and the use of the death sentence for convicted drug traffickers endangered members of the elite who were involved in these practices. Are you with me? He had already imprisoned several prominent members of the political elite, and his uncompromising stance on corruption was threatening the future economic livelihood of corrupt military, business, and political elites who had not yet been incarcerated. A split opened in the Supreme Military Council, with Buhari, Idiagbon, Magoro, and Rafin Dadi on one side, and Babangida heading the opposition. Are you there? Interesting. Siollun says the cleavage was exacerbated by policy differences between Babangida and the duo of Buhari and Idiagbon. Still reading from Siollun's book, Soldiers of Fortune. The author says, a split opened in the Supreme Military Council, with Buhari, Idiagbon, Magoro, and Rafin Dadi on one side, and Babangida heading the opposition. The cleavage was exacerbated by policy differences between Babangida and the duo of Buhari and Idiagbon. Babangida opposed Decree 4, the long jail terms being given to politicians, and Buhari's approach to negotiations with international lending institutions. That is one of the reasons Babangida was not happy with Buhari. Let's jump to page 51, the second paragraph here. Siollun says the pivotal point that pushed the tension between Buhari and Babangida into overt confrontation was Buhari's investigation into financial irregularities at the Ministry of Defense. The investigation threatened Babangida directly as he had been working at Army headquarters in the previous years. Firstly, as the Director of Army Staff Duties and Plans, and currently as the Chief of Army Staff. Siollun says that these investigations led to the discovery of suspicious financial disbursements and alleged racketeering by Babangida's close ally, Colonel Aliyu Muhammad. Muhammad's explanations, which were corroborated by Babangida, that the disbursements were used to fund the coup that brought Buhari to power, were not accepted, and Buhari retired Muhammad. You see that? Interesting, the power struggle. So perhaps Buhari was planning to deal with them, and they knew that if we left this man, we are gone. If you read this book, you'll see more secret about what happened during that era. You see, this classic is one book every Nigerian should read. Well researched, well written. Mark Siollun, Soldiers of Fortune, Nigerian Politics from Buhari to Babangida. I haven't read Babangida's account in his autobiography, and haven't read from Mark Siollun's book Soldiers of Fortune. One can conclude that power in the military era was transactional. Those who orchestrated coups were not necessarily driven by ideology, but by opportunity. But what Babangida really understood was that in the military, power is never truly yours until you control the forces that enforce it. Buhari had failed to do so. Babangida called himself a military president. He promised reforms. He promised a better Nigeria. But did Babangida give Nigeria a future of hope? Or did he set the stage for more crisis for the Nigerian state? I leave you to answer those questions. Thank you for being in class. I am Edmund Obilo.